Speed and urgency are the two most important qualities to have in business, bar none. And the key to unlocking both of those qualities is knowing your tools when we're talking about creating things. So in this video, what I'm going to do is show you 9 make.com tricks that will 10x your productivity. I'm doing this kind of for my internal team as well as a YouTube video, because I know that there's a number of people that I work with who also need to see this. So I'm just going to quickly go over these 9 tips. It shouldn't take too long to go over all of them, but hopefully you'll come away knowing something that you didn't know beforehand that would completely revolutionize how you do stuff inside of Make. So first one is copy and pasting modules. This is something that people don't actually know, but if you, and a fair few people do know it, but this is if you didn't know it. If you right click, or not right click, sorry, if you hold shift and then click down, control C and then control V, you can copy anything that you want. And you can hold and drag control C, control V, and do the exact same thing. And what happens is you'll see that these numbers will start to change. So the module number 9, which is this HTTP request, is number 13 here, and is number 10 is number 14 here. What ends up happening though, if I just connect this automatically, is that if we look at, let me look at an example where a few things will change. So in this situation, this is fine because the variables that are inside of these modules don't need to relate back to any previous step. But if I take, for example, the disco call flow that I have, if I take this as an example and I copy something where a search or a set of routers were using, the value of a previous variable in order to highlight what should be where, what will happen is certain variables in previous steps will need to be referenced in the same way, but they don't exist. And you'll start to see these like hollow variables inside of the modules. So if I just highlight and copy this entire thing, you'll see what I mean. So control C, control V. Do I have to attach this one? Yeah, I do have to attach it. So let me quickly make another route for this. Drag this over here so it stays out of the way. Stick that there and then auto align just so I can play around with it. If I click inside, that's I'll use the close one actually, because close will actually show it better. So we have here data company name, which is module number 42. When you copy over a lot of these steps, sometimes these modules that are inside do not carry over. Oftentimes they do. So if I, like for example, if I was to copy from one of these steps here, like one of the search steps that I'm using, I think this might be a good example. If I copy all of this over and then paste it, what will happen is the module should reflect the number for the previous step here. And when it doesn't, that's when the next trick will come into play, which is editing field names in open tabs. So if I go back into here and let me just delete this and show you what I mean. This is a really simple one, but it's also a really, really handy trick if you're building something that you've already built part of already. So if you go into here and I just pick any random variable, let's say 75 lead ID. If you just shift and highlight control C, open up a random new tab and press control V in the search bar, you get the naming system for Make's variables inside of plain text for you to mess around with. So this works. Oh, let me go back. This works in here. It also works in things like Notepad. So if I go in here and then click that, you can see 75.id. Now what this represents is double curly bracket, the number of the module, dot, and then the raw value of what we've just copied over. So if I go back in, if you look at lead ID, raw, it says ID. Number 75 is the number of the module. So we can very much assume that this variable came from number 75. Now, because it's in plain text, you can just change this. So let's say we've created a new set of them and it's now number 114 for the next step over. Let's say we're just copying this over and we're down here again. And instead of create a lead being number 75, it's number 117. But when we copy and pasted it, it didn't take this. So if I go here and I just come off of that and copy this, let me go back to this one and paste it, you'll see that we have 114.id. Now this is the raw value, but if you were to use an example from, let's take one of these hollow ones, 42 data company name. If I took that and then pasted that here, I could change this number to whatever I wanted and copied it back into here. And what it will do is it will take on the color of the thing that we are taking it from. And it will also fill in it will also be the hollow shape with the right number. So when you send another workflow, or you send another, like you press run once and you send another set of automations through it, it will fill it out and give you the information that was already meant to be there. So if you're making something over and over and over again, and you know that one of the problems is you have to keep on pressing backspace and then clicking in here just to get the same thing that you were looking for beforehand, and then after clicking it you finally have it, but you have to do that like 7 or 8 times because of what you're building, you can just copy copy that raw variable, paste it in here and just change things around. And then that is how you can circumvent a lot of those issues and build things that you've already built before without having to run a test flow just to make the thing appear. So that's number 2. Now, number 3 is the make dev tool. So this is something that make actually has themselves, which is its own Chrome extension that allows you to debug and manipulate your make scenarios. So all you'll have to do is just go to click on the direct link. So you can just Google it, click on the direct link, add it to your Chrome, and then it will show up around here. So this is the make dev tool. Now what this dev tool does is, if I go into, we'll go into here again. So if I go here and I have this entire automation, if I open the console, F12, usually the console isn't here, the console's like vertical, but you need it to be horizontal in order to be able to use it. But you can see down here, hopefully my face isn't covering it, next to performance insights and cookie editor, we have make. And what this does, if I click off that, is it shows us this little panel here, and this has a live stream, a scenario debugger, and tools. Now, from what I've used and knowing the other shortcuts and the other workflows that I use inside of Make for myself, the only thing in here that I've currently found of very, very great use is swap connections. So let's say I wanted to, let's say I've copied all of this. Let's say I'm making this again, but I need new connections, and I've already got one connection because maybe I'm making this for someone else. Maybe I'm making this for a new connection that I've had to create because the previous connection went dead. I need to change the connection, and by connection I mean this. So if I click on here and I go all the way down here, you can see all of the connections for Slack. You can change all of these at once. And so if you have a ton of the exact same thing working all the time, let's say for example, like look, I have close here all the time, and I have a close account that actually wasn't working, which I had to replace because we got a new account. But if we look at this, let's say I want to swap this connection out with everybody else's connections. So this is the normal one, this is the broken one. I'll click on the broken one, and let's say source module is number 48. I'll just type 48 in here, search leads. Target module, either swap, you want to swap the connection in one of the other close.com modules. So it will show all of the modules in general, but you kind of just want to have the ones that are closed. Now, if it's empty, the connection is swapped in the entire scenario. So if I click run complete, I can now click into here, and what it should do, hold on, I don't think it saved when I clicked this. Yeah, it didn't save. So if I go in here and yeah, I'll do it anyways, but just because I'm not going to save this, I'm not going to override this. So I've just clicked OK. So if I do this again, what will happen is if I click on the source module number 48, search leads, run, every single close connection now says this. So it's switched over, switched over, switched over. Every single one of them is switched over. And it doesn't affect anything that isn't this module. So switching this doesn't error out anything on the Slack modules or anything on the Calendly modules or any of the HTTP requests. It only messes with the closed connections. So you can do this to swap this entire connection across 20 different modules. If you have a ginormous automation and you want to just make sure that everything's working or everything's meant to be like doing the same thing for the same person, you would do that. One thing though is that once you've changed the connection, especially with something like a CRM, a lot of stuff can happen where you just have things that used to exist which don't exist anymore. So this isn't going to load any data, but the best example of this is in Airtable. So let me actually see if I can open up an example where I'm using Airtable and just run this again. So under here, if I was to change the connection, and let's say I even have the exact same table, what will happen in one of these, let's say this update record tab, is cool, the record ID is there, the company name is there, etc, etc, etc. Let's say I wanted to map something. This could be the exact same in somebody else's connection, but this has its own value. So this would be, so like each individual column has its own value, and that value is just like a string. Even though the name is the same here, the string value won't read. So you'll have to remap the variables every single time you swap out all of the connections. So you can do it all in one fell swoop, but you'll have to go in and edit the connections, or edit the variables, sorry. So that's kind of how I've used Make DevTool up until now, and it's quite effective for that one scenario. Try and use it for yourself so that you can find other things that would work for you, because there is a lot of stuff that you can do inside of it. All right. So that's Make DevTool. Next is testing webhooks in Reqbin. So what I'm going to do is pull up Reqbin, reqbin.com. And what this is it's an online REST and SOAP API testing tool. What does this mean? It means if I have a webhook, for example, and I want to run test automations to a webhook, I can send information to this webhook from an external website and run the automation whenever I want without having to trigger something inside of an app. So I'm using RB2B here as an example. Let's say you wanted to enrich and email a lead that went on your website that you now have LinkedIn information for. Well, let's assume that you haven't had anybody reach your website yet. Well, they give you a test payload inside of RB2B. And what this is all of the information that you get given back when somebody lands on your website and RB2B basically gets triggered. So what you can do with this is you can take this entire thing, Control-C, and paste it all the way down here. And if it's broken, what you can do is good old jsonlint.com, go in here and double check where it's broken. Now I already know it's because it's a comma and then this, and it needed to end in expecting a string after the comma, but instead I got the end curly bracket. So if I just delete this, I'm pretty sure it would work. Yep. So I'll just copy this inside of Reqbin, and then I'll take my webhook URL, which I get given here, copy that to the clipboard, paste it in here, and then run a post. Click on run once, run anyway, who cares? And then let me actually unlink this. I don't want to scrape the website. Click run, and then click send, and it will pop up with the exact same information that we've looked at. So if you have a webhook, which is the thing that you're using to trigger off an automation, and it has to be a make.com specific webhook, because if you do something like, and this is a bit of a tangent, but it's related to the point. If I go Airtable watch responses, this is a webhook, but because of the way that it's encrypted, or because of the way that things go, I could take this information and, in fact, if I just move this over here, I'll take this, copy the address to the clipboard, swap this one out with this one, and then run, and then click send. Airtable may allow me to do this simply because you can run scripts to webhooks. But if I was using something like PandaDoc, which actually runs off of that, or Calendly, which actually is a webhook as well, it probably won't give me the information. So if I click send, I don't get anything. So if you use a module specific webhook, so anything with the lightning bolt, which isn't the make.com version, you can't do this. But if you have this red webhooks one, you can do this all you want. So you can use this to test a bunch of automations that you're doing. And because webhooks are webhooks, you can use this any way, shape, or form. Like you're fine using this one instead of the other ones if you want to test things in this manner. And this is kind of how I was able to make the AI inbox manager as quickly as I was able to make it, because I was able to just send a bunch of information without any hesitation to it and making sure that everything was working correctly. So that kind of covers two of them. I think I've just shown you another one, which is, not really helpful. I've just shown you three of them. Great. So next we have setting and getting variables. So setting and getting variables is something that is very useful if you're creating massive automation. So if I just go back in here, you'll see that I do this all the time. So instead of creating one automation where the entire thing is one gigantic line, which is kind of hard to look at and hard to understand when things go wrong, what I like to do when there are multiple steps is I like to take every single macro action that needs to be done and put them after a router. And then, because what routers do is it works from top to bottom. So if I wanted to go first message, so the first thing that happens is this message, then it goes back down to the router and then goes all the way through here, then it goes back down to the router and then goes through the next one, back down to the router next, back down to the router next, and then back down to the router and then finishes off. Now, doing this allows me to correctly in my mind understand what activities are occurring in which places. So right here, I know just by looking at this that I'm doing a bunch of Slack actions. I am creating a channel and creating messages inside of Slack. Number two, I'm using Google Drive to create folders, and I'm adding PandaDocs to those folders, and I'm sending emails, which my assumption is onboarding emails. And then number three is, I'm saying my assumption is because this is how I build them anyways, and if I was looking at this multiple years in the future, I'd be able to understand what I've done here. This one here, I'm looking at the PDF and then doing a bunch of AI stuff to the PDF. And all the way through this, you can see all of these purple modules, all of these tools are over here. There's always one at the end and there's sometimes one at the start. This is called setting variables and getting variables. And now what this does is you can create, so if you see inside of, let me pull up the RB2B stuff again. So you can see here that we have key value pairs, LinkedIn URL, which is this, first name, which is this, last name, which is this. This key value pair is the building block of this type of code, which is JSON. What you can do is you can set a variable, and this variable is just one of these pairs. And in this case, for the automation that we were just looking at, up here is the Slack channel ID. So what we've effectively done is we've gone in here and we've said Slack channel ID C01234561 . This is what we've created by making that part of the automation. Now what we can do with this is we can click get variable later on in the automation to bring it back. So this one here was contract data. Down here we have a bunch of them. Slack channel ID, client folder ID, contract link, onboarding docs, all of this good stuff here. With all of this, we now have a bunch of information that we can package and then take elsewhere. So when you set and you get variables, you can rename things in your liking, because sometimes you'll get custom fields that just have random letters and random numbers in them. That happens a lot when you do like custom activities and close, for example. And you can create them and then rename them and then use them elsewhere. And that's the benefit of having, a set and get multiple variables option. So that is the fourth one. The next one is restarting the app. So sometimes, just like any computer, something messes up and you've just got to shut the thing down and then start it again. So there are some times where I'll basically go in to make one day and I'll just see everything is just a lot more bold. And then when I click on it and I try and drag it around, this is just a bug in Make, by the way. Like, this isn't a thing that's meant to happen. But I'll click it and drag it around, and what will happen is there's another version of the same thing just right there. I don't know if this has happened to anyone. I don't know if this has happened in any of my videos, but this happens at least once a day. And it is annoying, but if you just click refresh, you can kind of get around it and just like get away with it. The other reason to use the refresh is sometimes the logic that you have in your automations is perfectly fine, but the automation is not doing the right thing, whether it's a connection issue or something along those lines. Now, this is something that I've dealt with multiple times and then shut down my computer, gone back to it with the exact same logic that I started off, pressed the run once button, and it's worked completely fine. The only reason for that happening is something happening in make.com, nothing happening on my end because nobody else is working on the thing that I've just been trying to fix. So sometimes you just got to restart the thing down. You just got to close the thing, log off, log back on again, and then see what happens. So restarting the app is something that you can never, ever, ever forget, because when you're at your wit's end with something that you think that you know like the back of your hand and it doesn't work, sometimes it's not you. Sometimes it just isn't you. Preemptive error handling. So this is something that I do mostly for AI steps, and it's also something that I know needs to be done whenever I need to stop pressing F11 because I'm messing this up. It's something that I know needs to be done whenever I have a AI step in a very long convoluted automation. So there are kind of like 3 times where I will preemptively run an error handler, and it's when I'm using AI to do something which I think may be complex or has a lot of tokens, when I'm using HTTP requests with things that have a lot of tokens, or when I'm doing anything which is asynchronous. And I'll show you what those examples mean. So AI is, it's very simple. It's just, okay, I have a prompt here and this prompt is ginormous. And whenever I run this prompt, which I'm running on 14 pages of a PDF, what will happen is this will take a couple of minutes to run, and sometimes it will just error out. And if it errors out in this situation, the entire flow breaks and I don't get anything added to my project management systems, nor do I get anything added to my CRM, which is obviously not good. So what I'll do is in my AI step, which I'll just add and create over here, Chat GPT, OpenAI, okay, watch batch completed, whatever. All right. From now on, I'll just leave that there. If I click on this and then delete module, I want a error handler. If I right click on it and add an error handler, then what I can do is one of these 5. Usually it's either ignore or resume, because error handlers are great if you know that something may or may not break, and when it breaks, you want the thing to continue. There are obviously going to be other reasons, like rollback, commit, and break always have their own purpose as well. But whenever you're just doing something preemptively, sometimes you just want to ignore the error that may occur. And when you ignore the error, you can, and sometimes you can either ignore the error or you can add a router here. So you can see that you've got the error handler, then you've got apps in the scenario, then you've got all apps. So upon an error occurring, you can actually run a separate automation. So what I'll do sometimes is I'll just click a router here. And depending on the type of error, because if you click in here, let's just bring a Slack message up, for example. Let's just create a message. Create a message inside of Slack. If I go in here, create. In here, you can see that there are certain types of errors, and these are all on the make.com error handling side of their help guides. And there are a number of types of errors, one of them being, so there's rate limit errors, there's invalid access token errors, inconsistency errors, data errors, runtime errors, I believe, data validation errors. You can determine which one is the problem and then direct certain activities to different actions when those things happen. So when you error handle in that case, especially for AI, sometimes you don't want to stop the scenario and you instead kind of just want to make it so that the next time this runs, or when this continues to run, you just omit whatever the AI was trying to do and you give a replacement. And this is something that I've done even inside of this automation itself. So if I just come off of this and then go all the way down here, So what I've done here is I'm getting a pricing model, which is a JSON string, and I am passing that JSON string. And that JSON string, if what was created by AI was broken, it will error out. And when it errors out, I have this resume here. And what's meant to happen with this resume is it's meant to pick up on the fact that I'm trying to edit an Airtable item, and then give me examples or placeholders to put whenever this part of the automation is broken. So that's kind of the reason why the error handlers are there. So I'll use it whenever there's AI involved, whenever I'm dealing with a lot of text. So if I'm trying to take a transcript and use AI inside of that transcript, I'll put it through there. Or whenever there's something asynchronous. And asynchronous is when you send an action to an app, and the action does and the app does two things and give you back the information. So obviously it's post, and then they get the request, and then they will post something back and you get that request back. That's asynchronous. And sometimes there's a time lag between that. Best example of that would be enriching phone numbers in Clay, enriching phone numbers in Find Email, or something along those lines. You may send information from the first step into the Find Email or whatever step, and then it will just take a long time to continue going. So sometimes you may just want to add an error handler, because if, say for example, the next step is you're going into close and you're adding that person to your CRM and you don't have their phone number, just because it took 5 minutes to try and find the phone number, that should not be a reason for you to not be able to run the rest of the automation, because the lead still needs to go into the CRM. So that's just another example of error handlers. So whenever you're working with AI, whenever you're working with anything big, or whenever you're working with HTTP requests that are doing things like scrapes and all that kind of stuff, or HTTP requests on websites that are just flimsy, because there just are some websites that just don't really work that amazingly well, and you just get like 400 errors or different types of errors, you can just run an error handler and then save yourself that way. And that would be preemptive in that sense. All right, preemptive error handling. Now we've got thinking in blocks. So let me talk a bit more on what I mean by thinking in blocks. So you'll often have to do the exact same actions across multiple automations. And if you think about certain macro actions as blocks, say for example, you're wireframing the thing that you're trying to do. And let's say let's say you're trying to synchronize your funnel with your CRM. Well, action one may be whenever you get a new subscriber inside of in your newsletter, you want to create a lead inside of your CRM. Maybe you get a new person answering questions in your school group. You want to add that person to your CRM. Let's say you want to do this, you want to do this, you want to do this, and a lot of the things that need to be done are very, very similar actions. If you take that idea, you know exactly what that looks like when you've done it a couple of times. And the example that I use is creating without duplicating. So if you're adding opportunities and leads to a CRM, you're adding rows to Airtable, you're creating new folders in Google Drive, or you're creating tasks and items in ClickUp or Asana or other project management tools, it's all the same thing and it's all going to look the same thing. And I'll show you what it looks like now. So if you go in fact, you've already seen it in this video. So if I go in here, this is what I mean. So creating without duplicating is searching for the thing and having a search query within the thing so that you can find only one item, and then having a router which states the total number of bundles. If it equals 0, it's not found. If it's not equal to 0, it's found. And then when it's equal to 0, you create, and when it's not equal to 0, you update. Simple as. And this is the exact same for every step where you need to create something without making a duplicate. So if I can take that idea and I can go back into the contract flow and show this as well, because in here we search for files and folders. If it's found, we have the ID, and then we basically download the PDF, upload the file, and get the share link. If we don't find it, we create the folder, and then we do the rest of the steps. Very, very natural thing to look at. So this activity as a type can be grouped as a series of blocks, which you can copy and paste, sometimes from one automation to the other. So if you're doing a bunch of things inside of Close, or you have, let's say, a number of webhooks because you have a number of marketing channels where information gets fed into a webhook which you want to ping to your CRM, it's going to look basically the exact same. So you can do this over and over again. And then you can copy and paste from one automation to another, and then you can use make DevTool to change the connections and just have things done in no time flat. So that is one example of thinking in blocks. There are some other examples like getting a transcript. So the things that you would do all the time, like getting a transcript, taking that transcript and putting it into AI, and then having AI spit out something which you would have a router which would send things to. Another example for that would be the inbox manager, the AI inbox manager, because with the AI inbox manager, what you can do, or what is being done, is we have the long, gigantic HTML text message, which we then find, we push through a sentiment analysis, and then this sentiment analysis will give us 3, 4, 5, 6 different options, of which there are 6 different actions. So this whole idea of something big goes into AI and AI splits it across a bunch of different paths, that's another idea of a block. It's just a way to think about things. And whenever you hear certain things needing to be done, or you hear about certain actions, you can distill a lot of those actions down to those blocks so that you can correctly understand what needs to be built. And that kind of speeds up 80 to 90% of the thinking process before you even build the automation in the first place, because you can already envision what needs to go on paper. So that's that. And then the 9th one, which you've already seen over here because I'm terrible with Gamma today, is progression in stages. So progression in stages from a Scrum perspective is called inspect and adapt. And the idea is that when you're building something, so it's the whole idea of write drunk, edit sober. Writing drunk and then editing sober is fine, but if you write 50 pages of work and have to delete 30 pages, you've wasted a bit of time. Same thing with automations. So if you inspect the automation that you're creating part of the way through and then run it just to make sure that things are working, then you know that everything up until that point works, and you can then build from what you have. But if you build the entire automation and then you press run once and it fails on the first step, okay, great, let me fix this one. And then it fails on another step. Okay, great, let me fix this one. And then you just slow yourself down and make it so that everything that you've built just stops working for no good reason. And the whole idea about that is just don't build the entire house before testing the strength of the foundation. So keep that in mind when you're building these automations, because the total time that you will spend making an automation will be longer, even if you have a copy and paste version of 90% of that automation. Because you can copy that entire automation and then have 5 or 6 things go wrong with what you've copied and pasted over, which may frustrate you to a point where you'll just remove the entire thing and then make it from scratch. When in that time, you could have copied maybe 3 or 4 modules, put those into the new scenario, tested it, make sure that it worked, and then copied the next 4, and then copied the next 4, and repeat and repeat and repeat. And that will be how you create automations which feel like they take a long time, but in absolute perspective, actually don't take a lot of time at all. So with these 9 tools, hopefully you've learned something new. Hopefully you learned how to think about how to be quicker when it comes to building things in Make. What I do is I create sales and project management systems for different B2B businesses. So if you are interested in that, then there's links somewhere where you can find out some more information. So yeah, that kind of covers everything. And if you need anything else, have a look at some of the other videos. And because a lot of the automations that I've shown are videos that I've created where I've made them from scratch. So if you're interested in how to create a full onboarding flow, there's a link for that. If you're interested in how to create a booking flow which syncs with your CRM and sends alerts to your systems, I've got that as well, amongst a bunch of other things as well.